In the great palace of Zarion, everything glittered gold. Silver, glass, light and pride. But behind one tall silver door, hidden from the royal halls, lived a princess no one spoke about. Her name was Lyra, and she was born blind. Her legs were too weak to carry her weight, and her arms had thin scars from failed medical treatments. She was the king's only daughter, yet she had no titles, no visitors, and no voice in the kingdom. Her people whispered that she was cursed, that her birth had brought bad luck to Zarion's skies, so they locked her away, not in a dungeon, but in a room that looked pretty on the outside, but felt like a cage. She sat on a cold silver chair each day, her long white dress flowing to the floor. Her pale silver hair fell across her face, and her milky white eyes stared at nothing. Servants came to feed her, but never spoke. Some were scared, others simply didn't care. The king had declared long ago, "She will never bond, she will never rule, and she will never be seen." And so years passed in silence, until one day, someone got lost. His name was Cole, a human engineer from Earth. He had come to the palace to fix an ancient system that powered Zarion's weapons and shields. Humans were not royal, not important, not even respected much on this planet, but Cole had skills the palace needed. Wearing his gray utility uniform and carrying a heavy toolkit, he turned into the wrong hallway. The lights flickered, doors hissed open, and suddenly, he was standing at her door. It wasn't locked, just ignored. Curious, he peeked inside, and then he saw her. She was sitting quietly, her head tilted as if she heard his breath. Her face looked like carved marble, beautiful but empty of emotion. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers curled gently like she was always waiting for something that never came. "Hello?" Cole said softly, expecting to be told to leave. She didn't move at first, but then she turned her head slowly toward his voice. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice dry like it hadn't been used in years. "I'm just a technician," he replied. "I didn't mean to come in, I got lost." "Then you are the first one to ever get lost in my direction," she said, and for a second, her lips curved, just a little. Cole was surprised. He had seen aliens of all shapes and colors, but none like her. She didn't look sick or broken, just ... "Forgotten, I should go," he said, looking toward the door. "You may," she whispered. "That is what everyone does." But he didn't leave instead. He took one careful step forward. "What's your name?" he asked. She paused. "Lyra." The name hit him like a soft note on a piano, sad but beautiful. "You don't sound cursed," he said, half joking, half curious. "I don't?" she asked, confused. "Most say I sound like silence." Cole put his tools down and pulled up a small metal crate. "Well, Lyra, I've been talking to machines all day, and you're way more interesting." She laughed an awkward, quiet laugh, like someone remembering how, and in that moment, something shifted in the room. It didn't feel like a prison anymore. Outside the room, a servant passed by and gasped. A human was sitting with the cursed princess. Alarms of gossip rang silently through the halls, but Cole didn't care. He told her about Earth, blue skies, messy cities, music, oceans, pancakes, dogs. She listened, her head slightly tilted, her eyes blinking slowly as if she could see pictures forming in her mind. "You paint stories with words," she said. "I like that. You deserve stories." Cole said, "Not silence." When he left that day, she said, "Will you come back?" "I think I already want to," he replied, smiling, and as he walked away, he didn't notice the glow that had started to form in the air around her chair. A faint shimmer, like old energy waking up. Back in the royal chambers, a guard whispered to the king. A human entered her room. The king stood up in rage. "Remove him if he returns." But fate had already changed its path. The princess who was never meant to bond had taken someone's hand, and the one who took it was human. Cole could not forget the blind alien princess, even after returning to his small guest room in the lower palace quarters. Her voice echoed in his mind, not because it was loud, but because it was the only voice in that entire place. That didn't ask for anything, didn't command, didn't look down on him. He wasn't a hero, not a soldier or a prince. He was just a man who fixed things. But something inside him told him Lyra didn't need a hero. She just needed someone who didn't walk away. The next day, while pretending to check power conduits, Cole found himself walking the same path again, down the hall with flickering lights toward the room where most were forbidden to go. When the door opened, Lyra was sitting in the same place, but this time, her head turned toward the sound of his footsteps immediately. "You returned," she whispered. "I said I would." Cole smiled, placing his toolkit aside. He brought something new today, a small portable sound player. "You ever heard music?" Lyra tilted her head, confused. "I hear sounds, but I don't know what music is." Cole pressed a button, and soft earth piano music started playing, slow and calm, like rain falling in a quiet night. Lyra's lips parted slightly, her fingers twitching as if the notes were touching her skin. "This feels like a dream I forgot," she whispered. Cole watched her carefully, amazed at how much emotion she carried, even when she couldn't see. "It's called Clair de Lune," he said. "It's peaceful." "I like peaceful," she replied. "There is no war in music." Suddenly, a voice echoed from outside the room, harsh and cold. "Human, you do not belong here." A tall alien guard stood at the doorway, his armor shining and eyes narrow. "Leave now," the guard barked. "This chamber is not for your kind." Cole stood up slowly, not angry but steady. "I came to visit someone," he said. "That's not a crime. She is royal property," the guard snapped. "And you are nothing." But before Cole could speak, Lyra raised her voice just slightly. "He is not nothing," she said. "He sees me." The guard hesitated, surprised by the princess's words. She rarely spoke, and never in defense of anyone. Finally, the guard walked away, but not without a warning glare. Cole sat back down, a little shaken. "Guess I'm not very welcome here." "No one ever was," Lyra replied softly. "Even my own mother only visits when she has to." Cole was silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you want me to stop coming?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out her hand slow, unsure, like a child touching sunlight for the first time. "Stay," she said. He took her hand gently. Her fingers were cold, but warm with trust. And once again, faint shimmer around her began to return, something no one else had seen in years. For the next week, Cole visited every day. He brought music, stories, soft cloths with different textures so she could feel colors. And every time he came, her voice grew stronger, her smile more confident. But the palace was watching. Behind secret doors, the queen spoke in hushed anger. "The human is making her believe again," she said. "This must stop. She cannot bond," the king snapped. "It is forbidden, and worse, it is shameful. But what if her powers return?" The royal advisor whispered. "Legends say her line carries ancient energy that only awakens through bonding." "She is blind and broken," the king growled. "There is nothing ancient in her but sadness still." The palace felt different now. Servants whispered less when they passed Lyra's door. Some even slowed down to listen to the music coming from her room. One day, as Cole was telling her about Earth sunsets, Lyra suddenly asked, "What do you see when you look at me?" He paused, not expecting the question. "I see strength, and I see loneliness," he said. "But I also see someone who hasn't been given a chance. Everyone else sees a curse," she whispered. "But you see differently. Maybe I don't look with my eyes alone," Cole replied. Lyra smiled, but there was pain in her voice. "You are kind, Cole, but they will take you away from me." Cole frowned. "Let them try." What neither of them knew was that outside her chamber, the head of the royal guard was already preparing a quiet order to arrest the human before things went too far. But in the middle of this quiet war, something even stranger was happening. The energy signature near Lyra's room had started to grow. Lights flickered brighter. The palace sensors glitched. Ancient systems that hadn't responded in decades were waking up. The Palace AI even issued a strange message. Royal air detected, bond link forming, power unsealing, and all of it began the moment she touched the human's hand. The palace of Zerion had never been quiet. Servants moved like shadows, nobles spoke in cold voices, and guards marched with proud boots. But now, something different was happening. Whispers were spreading faster than orders, not about war, not about politics, but about her, the blind and disabled alien princess. Lyra, the one everyone had forgotten, was now the center of silent gossip. Why? Because a human had entered her chamber, not once, not twice, but every single day for a week. At first, it was laughed off. A lonely human technician visiting a cursed girl? It was foolish, harmless, maybe even sad. But then, people began to notice changes. Lyra was speaking again, not just to him, but to servants too. She asked for music, for news, for books in tactile script. Her face had color again, and she no longer kept her head bowed in silence. The maid assigned to her chamber whispered to another, "She laughed yesterday, and it was beautiful." Another servant added, "I saw her reach out and touch his face. She's never done that with anyone." But not everyone was pleased. In the high tower, the royal advisors stood before the king and queen. "Your daughter is awakening," he said carefully. "There's energy around her we haven't seen since she was born." The queen clenched her jaw. She was supposed to remain silent, obedient, invisible. The king paced slowly. "What has the human done?" "To her? Nothing wrong," the advisor replied. "He simply treats her like she matters." "Then remove him," the queen hissed, "before this madness spreads." But the advisor hesitated. "Sire, my scans show the royal palace core is responding to her presence now, especially when the human is near. Ancient systems are powering up. What are you suggesting?" The king barked. "I'm saying the forbidden bond may not be broken, it may be forming." The king stared out the tall window, his voice like ice. "If the curse is awakening, then we must stop it before it becomes truth." Meanwhile, down in her chamber, Lyra sat with her legs wrapped in a soft thermal blanket. Cole sat beside her on a low stool, holding a round fruit from Earth. "It's called a peach," he said, placing it in her hand. "Soft outside, sweet inside, but don't bite the seed." Lyra smiled as she carefully touched the fuzz on the skin. "Like me," she whispered. "Soft outside, dangerous in the center." Cole chuckled. "You're not dangerous. You don't know that," she replied softly. "Maybe I'm waking up something I shouldn't." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Lyra paused, feeling the strange warmth in the air. "Sometimes when I dream, I feel light running through me, not fear, just power." Cole glanced around the room, noticing again how the lights shimmered faintly when she spoke. "That's not a bad thing," he said. "Maybe it's a sign." She leaned closer, her blind eyes searching his voice. "You're not afraid of what I might become?" "No," he replied without hesitation. "I'm afraid of what they'll do to you if they realize you're special." Outside her door, footsteps stopped. Someone was listening. In a shadowed hallway, Captain Vorn, the head of the palace guard, stood still. He had orders to remove the human, but after listening to that conversation, doubt crept into his heart. He remembered when Lyra was born, remembered the glow she had as an infant, energy that frightened the court. But they called it a defect, a danger, a thing to bury. Now, it was returning, and somehow this human had reached it. That night, Lyra was alone again, but not lonely. She thought of earth fruits, of piano music, and of Cole's voice telling stories. She held a tiny disc he had left behind, one that played earth lullabies. She pressed the button and let the soft music fill the room. But outside, 2 guards approached her door with secret orders. "Take the human when he returns," one said. The princess must be kept quiet. Lyra couldn't hear them, but somehow she felt something. A sharp twist in the air, a flicker in the energy around her. Her fingertips tingled and her heart pounded inside her. The spark grew brighter, and far below the palace, old machines lit up, ones that hadn't worked in generations. Royal pulse detected, said a buried system in the palace core. Dormant power awakening. Asterisk deep beneath the golden palace of Zarion. Machines hummed for the first time in decades. They were ancient, built by ancestors no one remembered. Some said these machines were alive once, but after the birth of the blind princess, they had gone. Silent, like the world was holding its breath. Now they were waking up, and no one could explain why. Cole didn't know any of this. All he knew was that Lyra had smiled at a joke he made about Earth elevators. "Our elevators don't fly sideways," he said. "They just go up and down. Like confused trees." She laughed, a real, warm laugh that echoed in the room like sunlight through a window. But then her smile faded. "There's something I want to try," she whispered. "Come with me." He blinked, surprised. "Where?" "To the war room," she said. "I remember something from when I was little, a place with lights and sound. My father used to take me there before he stopped looking at me." Cole hesitated. "Will they let us in?" "No," she said calmly. "But that never stopped you before." "With help." She stood from her chair, leaning on his arm. Her legs were still weak, but her grip was steady. Step by step, they made their way through the palace halls, avoiding guards and servants. They reached a large door covered in silver veins and old alien symbols. Cole looked at the panel. "It needs a royal code to open," he said. Lyra stepped forward, lifting her hand. She placed her palm on the panel, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights blinked, softly at first, and the door slid open. Cole's eyes widened. "You opened it." "I shouldn't be able to," she said quietly. "I don't even have access to my own name." Inside, the war room was dark but grand, with a massive circular console in the center and walls lined with dead screens. It looked like the heart of a great machine that had forgotten how to beat. Lyra let go of Cole's arm and slowly walked forward, her hand brushing the edge of the console. Suddenly, blue lights began to glow beneath her fingers. The machines stirred like they were recognizing her, accepting her, welcoming her home. Cole stepped back in awe. "Lyra, you're activating it." Her eyes were blank, but her face was glowing. "I can feel it," she whispered. "Like it knows me." The room lit up fully, projections flickering to life, showing star maps, energy flows, and defense grids across Zarion's sky. Cole moved to a nearby panel, watching in shock as one section marked Royal Air Detected began flashing in bright green. "You're linked to it," he said. "You're not just a princess. This system needs you." Lyra reached out further, her hand trembling, but her voice was steady. "All my life they said I was broken, but maybe I was just waiting for the right moment to awaken." Behind them, the door suddenly hissed, and two guards entered, weapons drawn. "Step away from the console," one shouted. "You are not authorized." Cole raised his hands. "Wait, she's not hurting anything." But the guards didn't care. They moved to grab him. Before they could touch him, a pulse of light burst from the console, bright, warm, and alive. It knocked the guards back without touching them. Their weapons fell to the floor with a clang. Lyra stood in the center of it all, glowing like a living star. Her hair floated slightly, and her eyes, though still blind, were filled with purpose. The console spoke in a deep, echoing voice. "Bond initiated. Air confirmed. Human link accepted." The guards scrambled away in fear, shouting into their coms. Cole stood beside her, stunned. "They're going to come after us now," he said. Lyra turned her face toward him. "Let them," she said. Softly, undone hiding. Far above them, in the royal court, alarms rang out. The king rose in fury. "She entered the war room?" "She activated it, sire," the guard stammered. The machines responded to her touch, and to the human. The queen's face turned pale. "Then it's true. The bond. The ancient energy, it's forming." The king slammed his fist onto the stone table. She was never supposed to rise. This ends now. Back in the war room, Lyra and Cole sat on the glowing floor. Her energy had faded a little, but her voice remained strong. "Why do you stay?" she asked him. Cole looked at her. "Because when I saw you the first time, I didn't see a curse. I saw someone who deserved better." Lyra smiled through tired eyes. "No one ever looked at me like that. Not even my own parents. You're not alone anymore," he said gently. As the sound of heavy boots approached from the hall, Lyra's fingers brushed the console one last time, and somewhere in the palace core, a new program began. Royal Protection Protocol, online. The palace was burning with whispers, not fire. Every corridor, every hall, every royal chamber buzzed with the same name, Lyra. The forgotten princess had touched the ancient machine, and it had responded. She wasn't just alive, she was awake, and the human was still with her. Inside the throne room, the king of Zerion stood tall, his face hard and cold. His golden robe trailed behind him like a shadow. The queen sat beside him, stiff and silent. The court was filled with nobles, military leaders, and high priests. All wore the same expression: shock, confusion, and fear. "Bring them in," the king ordered, his voice sharp as a blade. The tall doors creaked open, and 2 guards stepped aside. Lyra entered first, leaning on a cane, but walking on her own. Her head was held high, her silver hair shining under the crystal lights. Beside her walked Cole, calm and unafraid. Gasps filled the room. Many nobles had never even seen the princess before. She was supposed to be hidden, silent, useless, but here she was, glowing softly, full of quiet strength. King stepped down from his throne, his heavy boots echoing like thunder. He stopped just in front of her, looking down at both Lyra and the human. "You had no right," he said slowly. "You entered a forbidden's chamber, touched sacred technology, and broke every rule of this court." "I was born in chains," Lyra replied softly. "But you were the one who locked them." The queen's hands clenched. "You shame your bloodline," she whispered. Lyra turned her face toward her. "You hid me because you were afraid. Not of what I was, but of what I might become." The king's voice rose. "This bond with a human, it is unnatural, unacceptable." Cole finally spoke. "Your machines accepted her. They woke up because of her. Doesn't that mean something?" "You are not one of us," the king spat. "You don't get to question our laws, but your laws left her to rot alone." Cole replied, "And she still chose kindness." The court fell silent, shocked at the human's boldness. The king raised his hand. "You will leave Zerion by morning," he said to Cole. "And you, daughter, will return to your chambers, never see him again." Lyra's lips trembled, but she stood firm. "If he leaves, I go with him," the room gasped. The queen stood up, furious. "You would abandon your people for a human?" "You abandoned me long ago," Lyra answered, her voice shaking but strong. The king stepped closer, towering over her. "Choose carefully. Girl, if you leave, you lose everything: your title, your name, your place in this world." Cole looked at her, ready to speak, but Lyra lifted her hand to stop him. She turned toward the court, facing everyone who had ignored her all her life. "I was born blind, weak, and broken," she said. "You all decided I was not worthy, so you locked me away like a shameful secret." The nobles looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "But this human," she continued, "didn't see a curse. He saw a person. He gave me music, words, time, things no one else gave me." She reached for Cole's hand, and the moment their fingers touched, a faint glow surrounded them both. "Now the machines that you feared obey me," she said, "because I dared to bond with someone who saw me, not my flaws." The king's face twisted with rage. "Then leave," he roared. "Go and vanish in shame." Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes steady though she could not see. "Then I will go," she said, "but I will go free." She turned with Cole and began walking away, but suddenly the floor trembled, lights flickered, The walls pulsed with a low hum. A voice boomed from the palace core. Royal HFY. Command transfer initiated. The high priest gasped. It's not just the war room, she's bonded to the palace itself. The king staggered back. No. It's not possible. A glowing path formed beneath Lyra's feet as she walked, like the palace itself was guiding her, welcoming her, and then the throne behind the king lit up, softly but powerfully. The queen stared in horror. She was never the curse. She was the key. Lyra paused at the doors and said quietly, I won't return as a prisoner next time. But maybe, just maybe, as your ruler, with Cole beside her. She stepped out into the sunlight. For the first time in her life, the sky didn't feel so far. The skies above Zarion began to shift. Clouds moved in strange patterns, electric winds flowed over the palace towers, and deep beneath the ground, ancient cores glowed for the first time in 100 years. And all of it was because the blind princess had finally stepped outside. Lyra stood on the stone steps of the royal court, facing a world she had never been allowed to see, even though she was blind. Her other senses felt everything, every breath of air, every sound of life, every vibration in the soil. Beside her, Cole watched silently. Still holding her hand, he felt it too. Something bigger was happening. Something neither of them fully understood yet. I never thought the sun would feel warm, Lyra whispered. Not through a window, but on my skin. You deserve to feel it every day, Cole said. And not just the sun, but the stars, too. They walked toward the outer palace garden, where trees shimmered with biolight and the sky above pulsed gently with alien moons. But they weren't alone. High above them, in a tower hidden by crystal glass, the royal advisor watched the princess with shaking hands. It's real, he whispered. Her link to the energy grid. It's real. The queen stood behind him, arms folded tightly. She is a danger, she said. If she unlocks the core, we lose everything. The advisor looked back slowly. No, my queen. If she unlocks it, we gain everything, but we won't be the ones in control. Meanwhile, deep in the city beyond the palace walls, trouble was building. Many nobles were angry, ashamed and afraid. They met in secret chambers, wearing masks and spreading lies. She's cursed, one said. She's bonded with a human, another added. She will bring war to Zarion. But far away from those words, something was already coming, something far worse than gossip or pride. In the orbit above Zarion, an enemy ship was approaching, cloaked and silent. It was a forgotten enemy, a race known only in old records as the Collectors. They hunted rare energy sources, and Lyra's awakening had lit a signal like a flare in the darkness. Back in the garden, Lyra suddenly stopped walking. Her fingers switched, and her face turned toward the sky. I feel something, she said, like a whisper in the stars. Cole looked up, frowning. A whisper? Not words, she said. A warning. Just then, a loud boom shook the palace, followed by a blast of red light in the distance. Guards shouted. People ran, and alarms filled the sky. An explosion had hit the outer gate. Something had pierced their planetary shield. The king rushed into the war room, only to find it already awake, showing red alerts across the surface. The high priest gasped. Sire, something is coming. Cole grabbed Lyra's arm gently. We need to get to the control chamber, he said. Now, she nodded. And together they made their way through the palace as lights flickered and floors vibrated. When they reached the chamber, the walls responded to Lyra's presence, glowing with energy. Screens lit up with alien symbols. Threat level, crimson source, unknown entity target, energy signature. Royal Lyra stood in the center, her hands open, her white eyes glowing faintly. They're coming for me, she said. They can feel the bond. The power. Cole moved beside her. Then let's use that power to stop them. She reached out slowly, placing her hand on the control sphere. The entire palace trembled, and her body lit up with energy. Suddenly she wasn't just Lyra the blind princess, she was something else. The machines responded to her voice. Lights danced around her like stars. She connected directly to the palace core, and through it, the planet itself. She could see, not with eyes, but with awareness. She saw every heartbeat, every system, every weakness. "Cole," she said, breathing hard, "there's a weakness in the southern shield. I can reroute power, but I need help focusing." "I've got you," he said, holding her hand tightly. "We'll do this together." Their hands clasped, their bond strong, and the system responded. Manual override. Accepted human link. Stabilized. Shield redirect. Complete outside. A blue dome of energy surged around the palace, just as the enemy ship fired again. This time, the blast bounced off. The ship shaken, its cloak revealed. Royal guards gasped as the enemy appeared in the sky. Black, insect-like vessel covered in red scars. The king watched from a tower, stunned. "She saved us," he whispered. The queen fell into her chair, silent. And in the heart of the control chamber, Lyra dropped to her knees, exhausted. Her power had held the shield, but it had taken much from her. Cole knelt beside her, catching her in his arms. "I'm still here," he said softly. "You did it." Lyra smiled faintly. "I saw everything. Not just the danger, but hope too." And for the first time in her life, she felt seen not as a burden, but as a protector. The alien sky of Zarion was no longer calm. It glowed with colors of war and power, but in the center of the chaos stood Princess Lyra, once forgotten, once hidden, now glowing with awakened strength. Her body trembled from the effort of defending the palace, but she did not fall, not as long as Cole stood by her side. Inside the command chamber, lights blinked and systems whispered her name. Royal bond confirmed. Leadership request pending. Cole looked at her gently, brushing strands of silver hair from her face. "You saved everyone," he whispered. Lyra smiled weakly. "No. We did." All around them, the palace's old systems were alive again. Things once thought lost were returning, because one human looked at her, not with pity, but with respect. In the royal court, nobles gathered once again, but this time, it wasn't to judge her. The high priest stepped forward, holding a glowing scroll of tradition. "The machine recognized her," he said, voice shaking. "She holds the bond, the code, and the connection to the ancient core. This hasn't happened in 200 years. The king sat frozen on his throne, staring ahead without speaking. The queen had left the room, unable to face the truth. Finally, a brave noblewoman stepped forward. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Is the human the real problem, or were we the blind ones all along?" Murmurs of agreement rose. Another elder stood up. "The bond is not illegal. It's just unheard of. The human saved the city with her," someone else added. "He didn't take power, he gave it back to her." The court began to shift, one heart at a time. Hours later, Lyra stood once again before the throne, not as a prisoner, not as a secret, but as the true heir of Zarion. Her pale silver gown shimmered with soft lights, not because it was royal, but because the energy inside her made it glow. She no longer leaned on a cane. She stood tall, though her eyes remained blind. Her sight had never been clearer. Cole stood behind her, silent and respectful, not asking for anything. The high priest raised the ancient seal. "By the voice of the system, the choice of the bond, and the will of the people, we welcome back Princess Lyra as rightful heir." Applause filled the hall, not from tradition, but from truth. The king slowly stepped down from the throne. His face looked older, his pride now softened with regret. He faced his daughter, and said quietly, "I thought I was protecting the throne, but I was only protecting my fear." Lyra nodded, not with anger, but with grace. "I forgive you," she said simply, "because I have already moved forward." The king turned toward Cole. "And you, human. Thank you. You saw her when even I could not." Cole bowed slightly. She didn't need saving. She just needed someone to believe in her. Later that night, the city of Zerion lit up in celebration, for the first time in decades. Music played in the palace, not to honor a war victory, but to honor change. People came from far corners of the kingdom to see the princess who had once been called cursed. Now they saw her as a symbol of strength. Lyra stood on the balcony, feeling the warm air against her face. Beside her, Cole held 2 cups of warm nectar. Handing one to her, she took it and smiled. "You stayed." "Of course I did," he replied. "This is your world, but somehow, it feels like home to me too." Lyra turned toward him, her voice soft and steady. "Then stay by my side, not as a guest, but as something more." Cole's eyes widened slightly. "You mean?" She reached out and took his hand, just as she had on the first day. "Bond is not just tradition," she said. "It's choice. And I choose you." Their fingers intertwined, and the soft energy glow returned, wrapping around them gently like a living promise. The palace systems quietly responded again. Bond strength, unbreakable, and so the story that began in silence ended in light. A blind princess once chained by her people rose to lead them, not through power or fear, but through compassion, and the human who had nothing to offer, no title, no rank, became the one soul who changed everything, because sometimes it doesn't take a warrior to awaken a kingdom, it just takes someone who dares to care.